this afternoon for the Faces of Homelessness event. My name is Chelsea. I am president of the Community Outreach Club. We would like to thank our speakers for joining us today. And
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm the vice president of the Community Outreach Club, and we are welcoming Lakia, Joe, and Logan to our group today. This will be the second time we've done this, and we had a great turnout actually, so give it up.
Well, as Andre and Chelsea said, we are the Faces of Homelessness Speaking Bureau. It's Lakia and Joe. And we exist because homelessness exists. And stereotypes about homelessness exist. And we honestly believe that we don't have to exist. One of our greatest ambitions is to be put out of a job. And we honestly believe that if enough people get together moving in the same direction, that we can just become sort of a history group that talks about what homelessness used to be like. And we honestly believe that. And so we're affiliated with Hands on Hartford. You can check out the Internet Machine if you want more details about that. And so when I was in high school, if you had asked me about homelessness, I would have said that it was like the island of Hearst. The island of Hearst is a little itty-bitty baby island off the coast of Antarctica. And so in high school, I would have thought, homelessness, sure, I'm not going to be ignorant, it's real. But it's out there, and it's small. And I also, being the expert that I was, I knew what the story was. If you're homeless, it obviously always involves a shopping cart, no exceptions, and there's always some sort of bottle in a paper bag. That was the story, and I was sticking to it. Spoiler alert, I was very wrong. And I went to college, and over a course of 2.5 years, I found out that that story was just straight up ignorant. It's almost like some stereotypes that can exist about Americans. My brother, he went to a certain town in northern Africa, and the family he was staying with, they were floored to find out that he did not own a Bentley and a shotgun. He owns neither of those things. And their kind of image, it came from, watching certain channels. And so while there are some Americans that own shotguns and some Americans that drive Bentleys, to think that all Americans drive Bentleys and own shotguns is ridiculous. The same thing can kind of happen with homelessness, with the story that gets thrown around. So, you might be wondering, well, what do we do? Well, it's our goal that you would walk a mile in our shoes, that at the end of a presentation, after Joe and Lakia share their stories and have conversation, you would understand homelessness, what it's like, what it feels like, how it happens, but then also, too, what you can do to be part of the solution. That right there, you can check that out online. Another thing to check out, it's Walk a Mile in My Shoes by R.J. Wordsmith, a member of our bureau who actually came last year. We helped kind of make this music video that eventually is going to be a documentary of showing stories of people in Hartford. That woman who you can kind of see, she's watering a plant in Hartford. Part of her experience is that every day, while she was homeless, she would go clean up the pond at Bushnell Park and water those plants. And so anyway, like when I was in my island of Hearst land, I was not thinking of a woman named Karen watering plants. But before we get to the real part of this presentation, which is Joe and Lakia sharing, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of context. And there are 3 things that I want you to know to keep in mind while Joe and Lakia are sharing. 1, people who are homeless are people who are homeless. You might say, well, yeah, duh, Logan, of course I knew that. If you had a multiple choice test, I'm sure you would answer positively. But there are people who have actually come to believe that they are invisible after, days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months, where they just come to think that they're less than human. So there's a video that came out of Florida where this gentleman, he went around asking people who were homeless, what's one thing that people wouldn't know about you if they were just walking by? So he gave them a permanent marker, they wrote on a piece of cardboard what their answers were. And these were some of their answers. This gentleman said he once had a scholarship to play baseball. This gentleman, he was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad from 98 to 2000. And this gentleman, he had a degree in biology from West Virginia University. So whenever you're talking about, a homeless person, you're talking about a person who is homeless, a person with hopes, dreams, likes, dislikes. These are people, and when we talk about the numbers, you can never lose sight of the names. There is a person at the end of these statistics. You can never lose sight of that. 2, there isn't just one story. So this is where we get a little audience participation. So how many stories do you think there are on a given night? So So what that means is how many people do you think are homeless on a given night? And there are 4 options. A, not a real thing, B, 100,000, C, 578,000, or D, 754,000. So we're going to have a show of hands of what you think is the answer to this question. So, who here thinks option A is the answer? All right, there's hope for this group. Okay, smart bunch. All right, how about option B? Option C? Okay, option D. All right. Survey says 578,000. If you answer D, you're actually right as well, because that's a lowball estimate, which I will tell you why. As far as how many that is, sorry if you're convulsing a little bit, that's enough people to fill 16 Fenway Parks. And once again, that's a lowball estimate. It's more like 20, 25. So this right here is a question of, so unaccompanied youth. So who here is underneath, is 24 or younger? Raise your hand if you're 24 or under. Okay, you would be considered a youth in the eyes of HUD. Unaccompanied, that means you're not with your family, and for a week or more over the course of a year means that you're homeless for more than a week in a span of 365 days. So if I was to guess how many people that apply to, I would maybe guess, 50,000. I mean, how can a person really guess? The number of people underneath the age of 24 who are homeless for more than a week and not part of the family is 550,000 every year. And that's enough to fill Rentschler Field 14 times. So homelessness, it's not just the island of Hearst, the shopping cart. It impacts people 23, 22, 21. It impacts people of all ages. And the third thing I want you to know is that the stories might surprise you. So, the show of hands, you guys did great the first time, so we have another question for you, which is what % of the stories do you think involve families? So if you had 100 people lined up, how many of that 100 do you think would be part of a family unit? And so we got 4 answers. And so, once again, just show of hands. Who here thinks option A is the answer? How about option B? Okay. C? All right, we got a trusting bunch. And D. Okay, the answer is 40%. And this is a stat from HUD. 37.8%. Who here has ever heard of Connecticut College? So, a college in Connecticut, hence the name. And you have the same chances of finding a male student on the campus of Connecticut College as you do of finding a person who's homeless who is a member of a family unit. So anyway, my little conceptions in high school are they're ludicrous. They're not even close. And the last thing, it's just think of the question of what do you think are some of the top causes of homelessness? So do we have maybe a couple people who'd want to, just kind of raise your hand and say, what are some of the reasons you think people become homeless? All right, first gentleman in the red. Loss of job. Yep, financial issues. Yep. Illness. Drug addiction in the back. Broken family. Okay, back by the pole. Yep. Mental illness. PTSD. Loss of family. And one last one. Foreclosure. So we have financial issues, family issues, which also involve, if you come out as being homosexual, we have mental illness, we have substance abuse. So there's a lot of answers. The cool thing is they asked this question to a bunch of mayors in 2012, and they gave their answers. And what they say is the number one reason for homelessness is the number one reason for homelessness. And this is what they said. The number one reason for homelessness is lack of affordable housing. So if you had asked me in high school, I would have put number 5 as number 1, hands down. Like that was obviously the reason why people become homeless, but I would have been really wrong. And the reason why lack of affordable housing is the number one reason is because of this. If there aren't enough homes that people can afford, people are going to end up homeless. It's like a twisted game of musical chairs, but instead of ending up on the floor, you end up in a shelter or in a car or by a river, and instead of waiting until like the next turn, it's not that easy and it's tough. So that's why that's the number one reason. And also poverty and unemployment kind of go hand in hand with that. If there aren't well-paying jobs, it doesn't matter how cheap those houses are because you don't have money to pay for them. So anyway, I just wanted you to remember those things. That 1, people who are homeless are people who are homeless that have stories. 2, there isn't just one story, and the stories might surprise you. And now I'm going to stop talking. And we're going to get to the real great part of this presentation, which is hearing from people who have experienced it. Hearing from Joe and then Lakia to hear their stories. And what I want you to keep in mind is that this isn't just a presentation, this is a conversation. So while Joe is sharing and then Lakia, be thinking about maybe some questions that you would want to ask him and then her, because you're going to have the opportunity to do so. Without further ado, if you could give a round of applause for Joe Kostowski.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here again. I was here last year for the first one, and I'm glad to be back and see familiar faces of the faculty. My name is Joe. I currently live in Bristol. I started working when I was 7 years old, bussing tables in my uncle's restaurant. I had a paper route, just like everybody else my age back then in the 70s. I had a huge work history, so I started working when I was 7, and I worked all the way up until I was 50. In 2005, I landed what I thought was my dream job. I got a job as a warehouse supervisor for a multi-million-dollar electrical supply house in East Hartford. And I was doing all right. I had been married. I have a couple of kids. I have a son and a daughter who are now grown. I had gotten divorced along the way, but in 2010, I had come off a forklift. I took a bad step, and I wrecked my knee. I didn't think it was too bad, because me being a thick-headed Pollock, I said to myself, oh, I'll just shake it off like I shake off every injury, and I'll just keep working. So the next day when I couldn't walk, I was like, oh, there's something serious going on here. So long story short, through a bunch of tests and everything, I basically pulled everything, tore everything, ripped everything you could in your knee. Through the testing, they found out I had a blood clotting disorder, so they couldn't do the surgery. So when the company I was working for found out that I wasn't going to have the surgery repair my knee, and that I couldn't do all my warehouse duties that I used to do, they decided in December of 2010, for my 50th birthday, I got a letter from them saying that my position was being terminated. They no longer needed me. Fast forward a little bit, I was living in Newington at the time. I was doing all right. I had a comfortable life. You know, I had a duplex, had a car. I didn't think much of it. Unemployment tells me that it was a workman's comp thing. Workman's comp told me it was an unemployment thing. So now I'm faced with no job and no income coming in. So I had lived in Newington since 2005, and I was talking to my landlady, nice person, but she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. So I started making phone calls. And this is what got me to where I am today. I must have called just about everybody. I called 211 and I said to them, what do I do in my situation? And I called all these agencies because I had no income coming in. They do have programs that'll help you from eviction, that'll prevent you from being evicted if you have income, because you have to be able to pay something, they'll set you up again. I had no income because unemployment and workman's comp were still battling who was going to pay me. In the interim, I had to get an attorney to work on these things, which takes time. So in May of 2011, I wound up being evicted from where I was living. It was a mutual agreement. We went to court and signed a waiver saying that, you know, I hold no ill will towards her, but I couldn't afford to pay the rent. And while this was going on, I told my son and my daughter, don't worry about me, I'll be fine. You know, there's things in the works, because I didn't want them to have to worry about me because they had their own things. My daughter was married, she has 2 children, and my son was living with his girlfriend, so I didn't want them to have to worry about me. I wound up living on a motel on the Burlington Turnpike. And while I was there, I continued to call these numbers that 211 gave me. And every agency told me the same thing. You have no income coming in, so we can't help you. So I had to sell my car so I could live in the motel. And you don't think about these things. You don't think they can happen to you, but you have to realize I had to pack up my whole apartment. I had to get all my stuff into storage. I had to find something that I could afford. All these things are going through my head, and my head is spinning, but I never really gave up hope because I figured I'd find a way out, that there's got to be something that will happen, and there's going to be some program or something that will be able to help me. In the meantime, I'm going to physical therapy, I'm going to my doctor's appointments, they're telling me the same thing, that we can't do anything for your knee. I'm trying to find a job. When you're 50 years old and all you've done all your life is mostly warehousing like myself, I've had other jobs, but that's been the main focus of what my work history was. When you present yourself like, well, I have an injury, but I can do the computer work. I can do everything in a warehouse except the heavy lifting. It was tough. I went to a lot of job interviews, and I must say that I feel I was discriminated against a few times because of my age. I can't put a finger on it, but that's the feeling I got. So one night I was sitting in the hotel, and I was kind of frustrated because I really wasn't going anywhere. Now you have to imagine, my money is running out. The hotel costs $190 a week. And you only can stay there for 2 weeks because you have to leave for a couple of days, because all the hotels in the Burlington Turnpike, they do this to people. If you stay there for more than 2 weeks, you've established residency. And then if you don't pay, they have to evict you. So I was able to stay 2 weeks, and I had to spend the night out. Fortunately, I went to my son and my daughters, and I'm still sugarcoating everything to them. And then I went back to the hotel. So one night I said there, I was sitting on the bed, and I said to myself, there's got to be something I can do. So, I have a little bit of faith. I said, please God, help me. So usually when I pray, I'm not given what I want, but I'm always shown a way. That's what's happened in my life. So next morning I woke up, I said, I'm going to call Senator Blumenthal's office, which I did. And luckily, through calling and making that call, they pointed me in the direction of who I should talk to, what attorney I should see. And they got me a workman's comp check, which was a big accomplishment, which got me into rapid housing and recovery, which got me an apartment. But while I was sitting there, I made a vow, and I said, because of all the trouble I've had to go through, that for the rest of my life, I'm going to devote myself, because I was thinking of the people that are out on the street. And it's tough for the people out on the street. Me, I have a brain that works. I came from a strong family. I've always been taught problem-solving skills. I figured I can get through this, but I was really reaching my wit's end. So I said, if I'm having this much trouble, imagine the people on the street that don't have a phone, can't make a call, worried about how they're going to eat, how they're going to keep themselves warm. So that's why I said, once I get through this, and I knew I would get through this, that I was going to become an advocate for homelessness, which is what I do today. But looking back in retrospect, people don't realize, we take a lot of things for granted. It happened to me. I never thought it would happen to me. And of course, my children were really ticked off at me after I told them everything I went through, because why did you tell us? But in my eyes, I didn't want to walk up to my children and say, your dad's a failure, because that's how I felt at the time, even though I wasn't. But I wasn't about to do that and put extra pressure on them. So I got rehoused in Bristol in 2011, in July of 2011. I was only homeless for 6 weeks. And when I say homeless, it's not the homeless with the shopping carriage and living out on the street. I didn't experience that. At least I had a place to go at night. There are people out there, and you see how the weather is. I think about them every night. Someone will die on the street tonight. Someone will be alone tonight. Someone will be hungry tonight. And it's my goal, and it should be the goal of everyone. We're all human beings. We have to care about each other. So my message to you would be, if you see a homeless person, or you see someone down on their luck, or you see someone sitting on a street corner, they may have baggage, but I'm sure they didn't start their lives wanting to be that way. If you don't have any money or food to give to them, at least look at them and validate them. Let them know that they do matter, that they're humans, because we're all humans. We all should care about each other. We've gotten to the point in this country where everything is about what we have and what we own, and how am I going to outdo the next guy. And I would like to point to a speech that President Jimmy Carter made in 1979. It was called the Malaise speech, where he said, we used to be a country that we were identified by who we were. We're becoming a country of being identified of what we have. I want to impress upon you, yes, some people don't have time. It's not for everybody. But this is something that we as people have to care about. Homelessness, like Logan will say later probably, is a man-made problem. We can cure it. We can do things about it. In the 4 years I've been doing this, I've seen a lot of strides in this state and across the country. We have things going on now. We're going to start the 100 Days Challenge in the Hartford area. We're going to try to house as many homeless people as possible in 100 days, no questions asked. I was happy to see Governor Malloy yesterday start his Second Chance initiative, because a lot of things that happen to people, you have a drug conviction, you get a felony conviction, doesn't mean you're a bad person. You may have made a mistake, but you haven't been rehabilitated. You have no chance in life. Poverty, being incarcerated, all these things lead to homelessness. I come from one aspect of it, and I feel for the people on the street. I consider myself blessed And there's a reason why I went through what I went through, so that I can help people because I have the ability to. So if I could leave you with anything, it would just be, remember, we're all human beings. We may not like to see it, we may not like to say that it happens, but it does, and these people do exist. And it's something that we can try to help and change a little bit. So I thank you for your time.
So at this point in time, presentation becomes conversation. If you have any questions for Joe, feel free to raise your hand, and Joe, you can call on whoever.
Yes, sir.
How far along did you feel that you was not far away from the shopping? Did you ever feel that?
How far away was I? Do you think I was? I never felt that desperate. Like I said, I'm not here to preach, but I was raised with faith, and that I have a faith. Like I say my prayers, so I never felt that hopeless. I never felt like things weren't going to work out. I would have to say that comes from my brother who passed away from cancer 22 years ago, who taught me that there's nothing you can't face. So after seeing the struggles he went through, my life since then has been like, there's nothing I can't face and overcome because there's always solutions. So I never thought that was going to happen to me. I don't know, maybe I was that close. I mean, with the money gone, if I had made the call to the senator's office and they'd gotten me a workman's comp check, I don't know what would have happened. You know, I'm glad you bring that up because I never really thought about it that way. But I don't think I was that close, but it can happen. I can see how the spiraling downward can happen, especially if you don't have the ability to do things for yourself.
Can I just interrupt and say?
Oh, sorry.
We need to switch mics so that I can give this to somebody and you can talk in that one. Who had a question?
Put up there. Hello.
It's good to go.
I thought it was good to go. Technical difficulties. No? Still not working? Okay. All right, here's what we're going to do.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You'll leave the mic out there. I'll speak like this. Is that all right?
Okay. All right.
Did you have any money saved, like at all, or you just kind of went through it when you lost your job?
That's a great question, and because we have a time, I can't always throw everything in. But what had happened was my son was living with me a couple years before that, and he had decided he wanted to go to Lincoln Tech, select my daughter before him. I helped pay for half his education. So I paid for the half of the $22,000 that it cost to go to Lincoln Tech. That was $10,000 was what I had saved up. So I was just starting to rebuild that again. So it happened.
Also your kids, you gotta.
Right, it happened to me at the worst possible time, but, fortunately my ex and I know that we have to split things 50-50, so that was my part as being, a parent, like you said, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Joe, thank you for sharing your experience, hope, and overall just great story. When you were homeless on the Burlington Turnpike, did you take the bus, and was eating a large factor? Were you always wondering where the next meal was going to come from? How did you kind of budget your money to know how it's going to last, and what kind of stuff did you have to eat?
I walked a lot. Fortunately, where the hotel was on the Burlington Turnpike, it was close to a shopping center, and there was a deli down the street, and I wasn't that far. The Stop and Shop was right over there, so I basically ate small meals. I know I look like I'm a big guy, but what they had found was I also had a thyroid condition I didn't know about, so I've been on medication for that because I really don't eat a lot. So eating wasn't a priority for me. Trying to find permanent housing was. So most of the time I was nervous and I really didn't want to eat a lot, but I did walk a lot, and it's one of the things, like when you live in a duplex, you can do your laundry anytime you want. Well, I had to put my laundry on my back and walk to the center of Newington and do it in the laundromat there, where I ran into people that I used to live in a neighborhood, and they're like, what happened? And then I told them, well, why didn't you tell us? But there really isn't anything they could have done, you know? They're not going to take me into their home, so I know what you're saying. It was not a problem for me, but if you can imagine someone who's on the street every day hungry, that becomes a problem for them. So, you know, that's what I like to think about, and like I said, it wasn't a problem for me, but that was a good question. Thank you. Way in the back.
My family's been in a similar position. My dad and my uncle, you know, in some ways, I have been in a similar position when they were kids. Growing up, so definitely,
I can understand what you go through because they've told me their life stories of how they had to be, you know, on the streets and trying to find money. So I can definitely understand what you go through because all the time my dad tells me how he had to scrounge money just to get an ex-girlfriend, you know, back. You know, he just lived almost like you. Even my two uncles, Uncle Sal and Uncle Ken, he's just been, you know, through this life lesson. He's always told me, you know, this story you've had, you know, he's been there. And I feel like I'm just, you know, knowing how people, you know, when you're, you know, growing up with a father that's like that, it's just hard to understand, you know, but I've had my father been there, my two uncles, so I can understand, you know, and my parents are kind of still there. And it's just hard when you see somebody on that, you know, thing. So I understand where you're coming from because my parents are still, you know, almost on that stretch. Sometimes they don't have TV. Sometimes. I mean, I was with my grandparents having everything, but when I'm done with my parents, they lose their cable, they lose their phone. And it's just, you know, that border. So I understand what you go through every day. So I'm on that border of, oh, I have everything, I don't. So I can understand what you go through every day of my life. So I can understand, you know, because I'm on that border every day of my life. So I just want to say I've seen it every day with my parents, and I lost my grandfather basically, you know, almost because of the arguments I've had between my parents and my grandmother and him. So it's just one of those things that I just want to say. It's, you know, I've grown up in that, you know, where it's border line, you know. But I want to say I understand how it is. You know.
Well, I thank you for that, and I hope things get better for you. Maybe I should add a little addendum to my story. It took me a couple of years, but I'm on Social Security disability. You know, I get a monthly payment. I was living in an apartment by myself, and my daughter bought a house 2 years ago, and she said to me, "Dad, I know how important this work is to you, so we have the room. Why don't you come to this place? You don't have to worry about rent or roof over your head ever again, and you can go do what you have to do." So because of her, I'm able to speak, and you know, I don't have to worry about work that much. I work from time to time. I work seasonal jobs when I need to, when I need a few extra things, but I'm fine now. So, but I hope that it gets better for you, and I understand where you're coming from.
can I just say that
Sure.
I'm proud of there's not many people that want to help other people, and they will just pass by. I've been homeless with my child, so I know how it feels. And for you to just realize that what you've been through, you need to get. You don't want nobody else to go through that. That's what I've been through things that I never want to go through. Like I just want to say I'm so proud of you, and I'm glad that I'm like in this world.
Well, thank you, but
Sorry. Finally, get up here.
I think a little bit feels like I'm a humble person. I'm not looking. I appreciate what you're saying. It's hard for me to accept that, but I hope that one day you're young. I mean, you guys go out and enjoy your lives, do all the things you want to do, because I certainly did it when I was young too. But I have gotten into arguments with a couple of my older family members who don't understand why I don't get paid for this, and I hope someday you can realize and feel the joy of doing something that has no monetary return, but has a feeling of making you feel good as a person, that you actually have the power to change things. And that's what I'm trying to get across, is we as a whole, as people, have the power to change things. We have to raise our voices, we have to speak up, we have to be heard. And, you know, I write senators, I email congressmen, I email to the president, I mean, I do all these things, and it's important. It's important to vote, it's important to have your voice heard, it's important to do all these things, which a lot of people don't have time to understand it, so I'll do it for you. But any little bit you can do, just, you never know what the ripple effect is going to be. So, but thank you for that. Appreciate it.
I'm not going to need my voice.
Okay.
Now that you actually mentioned it, it's actually kind of, again, commendable because in my perspective, when it's in 30 years of my life, I've seen a lot of people are too busy trying to wanting money, wanting wants. It's wants that they need. It's not what they need in life. So it's, when people come up to you and say, well, why are you getting paid? The feeling coming from you is you don't care if you're getting paid. You're doing something that's come from the heart. So, honestly, seriously.
Being humble like I am, this just embarrasses me when it does. I mean, I'm human, you know. I'm not looking to gain anything other than just knowing that if I can change one person's life, then my mission's been accomplished.
Amen.
Also, kind of, it's more of an opinion-based question. I just want to know your opinion, and also I know you haven't spoken yet, but I kind of want your opinion as well. When it comes to society, nowadays, today, when people are overlooking stuff, do you think everybody, or a majority of society, is just too quick to judge a book by its cover?
Because, like I was talking to, sorry if I forgot your name, but I just read a book. It's called Think by Guy Harrison, and I would recommend it to anybody here, and it's called Why You Should Question Everything.
What's it called?
Think.
Bible?
Guy Harrison. And the subtitle is Why You Should Question Everything, and it basically speaks to that we've become so entrenched in what we believe to be the truth that we actually are believing things that aren't true. So that's why you should question things. And yes, we judge the book by its cover because that's the way the world is now, because we're so media engrossed in everything. Whereas back in the day when I grew up, my education was being in a mud puddle, riding a bicycle, playing baseball, doing all these things outside, that it was a simpler life, But yeah, that's my opinion, yeah. I don't want to bet.
Mine's pretty quick.
Okay.
Were your parents alive when this happened to you?
No, unfortunately, both my parents, my father passed in 1990 and my mother in 2001.
Awesome.
How do you think they would have reacted? Do you think they would have most likely helped you as much as they could?
I probably wouldn't have gone to them. I would have gone to them as a last resort, even though they would give the shirt off their back, because my brother became sick with cancer. They took in his family, and that was a great sacrifice on their right. And I'm sure that's how I would have felt. But they also raised me to be, to want to help people, to want to do good. It's just the way I am. That's the way I was raised. Yeah.
That's good though.
I'm sorry. I will.
On your journey, did you find people that were not helpful or that just looked past?
Yes. I came across quite a few people that, you're just a name on a page. You're not a person to them because they have a stack of paperwork like this, they're answering the phone and telling us, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, get back to you. So yeah, I don't think it was who they were personally, but it's their position and where they are because of their role later with casework, that's how it became. Sure. I have a question from the gentleman back, I'm sorry. Yes.
I was just wondering if you ever figured out why you were not compensated for involuntary termination? Because as far as I knew, I'm sorry, if you were terminated from your work and you worked there for some period of time, you should be compensated, especially if you got hurt on site.
Can you hear me? What had happened was, this is what got me thinking to why I needed to help people, because you don't think about that right away. You think about, okay, what am I going to do for money? Where am I going to live and all that? So once I got the attorney to help me with the workman's comp and the unemployment, he said that's an option on the table, but you can't get all three. You can't have a windfall. You have to go through one, because even though you're getting workman's comp, when you eventually get Social Security, they pay you retro to when you were disabled, but you have to pay back the workman's comp. It's not like you get money from workman's comp and you get money from... So if I went and sued, that money would have also been taken out of that. The way the company got around it was, which speaks to your class about business ethics, was they decided to terminate 3 other warehouse supervisors on the East Coast along with me. So they basically had their bases covered. I could have had a case, but it would have been a long, drawn-out thing, and I wasn't ready for that. I'm told I have time for one more question. Only because I'm sorry.
What you said you were rehoused. What part of the population, the homeless population that you've worked with, do you think is the hardest? Is it? I don't think I need it. Is it those with drug addiction? Is it those with felonies? Is it those with mental illness? Do you see that there's one part of the population that's harder to really get back into a mainstream living situation?
Everything you just mentioned. My personal thing is there shouldn't be one homeless veteran in this country, as far as I'm concerned. We can spend $6 billion on war, but we can't take care of the people that come back and serve this country.
Amen.
A lot of them have not been tended to with the PTSD and their drug addiction, especially the largest homeless population right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is Vietnam War veterans with their heroin addiction and all that. That was never addressed, and those people were left to the curb. So everything you said, yes, it contributes to it. So where do you start? You know, one person at a time.
So not knowing where to start,
Right.
not just taking it as a comes.
Right, absolutely. I'm
no
sorry. I
round of
appreciate all the
applause.
questions. They were great. Thank you.
And so, as Joe said, we honestly believe that people can make a difference. If I had to throw a couple things onto a couple questions that were asked, one of our speakers, Ralph, he said one time he was in a grocery store, and there was this old woman who was buying a lot of cat food. She just stacked up her cart with cat food. And so Ralph went to his friend and he said, "What's the deal with this lady? How many cats does she own?" And his friend said, "Ralph, that's not for her cats." And so he realized that this woman was actually buying these things of cat food because they were the cheapest sorts of protein that she could get. And so when you're asking about food issues, that is a real issue. And the way I describe it, it's people are asking questions that no one should have to ask. Should I pay my light bill or give food? That's a horrible question. There's no good answer to that. And so that is part of the homelessness story of making those really hard decisions. But yeah, Joe, once again, thank you so much for sharing your story. Yeah.
I don't know how many people here are aware, but do you know that the people that manufacture cat food and dog food, it's mandated by federal law that it has to be edible for human consumption? Wow. Think about that. Think about that. Sorry. Thank you.
So now we're going to hear from Lakia, another person with another story. And so once again, presentation becomes conversation, so be thinking about questions that you'll want to ask Lakia. Without further ado, we're going to hear from Lakia. And so we're going to be doing kind of interview style here. I get to play a little Oprah Winfrey, so ask you some questions. So Lakia, could you tell us maybe currently what you're doing, what you're up to with your life?
Right now, I do work at PR and I do women's studies.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have a total of, including me, is 8 of us.
And could you maybe tell us, what's your favorite movie? What are some good movies you've seen?
Well, my favorite movie would be the new one, Black or White, and I like light girls because I'm a light girl.
Could you tell us your thoughts about snow?
I can't stand snow. I wish Connecticut had spring and summer year round.
There might be some sympathy in the room. So jumping into your story, you went to MCC for a semester. So could you tell us what you were studying and what that was like?
I was actually studying PR back then.
And what kind of interests you about PR?
I love that I don't have to do the news. I can do the documentary aspect. I can travel.
And so I think the way your story goes is after a semester, you ended up having to sort of, kind of hit the pause button. Why was that?
My mother became pregnant when I was 20, and the doctor told her that the child would be born with congenital heart disease, and she wouldn't live that long.
And so you hit the pause button so that you could help out at home?
Yes, I actually took a semester off, and I helped my mother, my sister, and my other siblings.
And so helping your siblings, what did that look like?
I was like the second mom in the house. I really didn't have a life for myself.
And so, like, on a daily basis, you would wake up and then...
I would wake up, I would make sure they get on, you know, they took, they ate, and I made sure that they brushed their teeth, they got on the bus, they were dressed. That's what went on back then.
And how long did that last?
It lasted for up until my sister passed away, which was 2002.
And that after your sister tragically passed away, you helped plan the funeral?
Yes, I helped plan the funeral, I wrote the obituary.
And so was your mom grateful for that?
No, she never was appreciative. She never said thank you.
And then, I guess, so after the funeral, what did your mom say to you?
She asked me to leave.
Wow. So why? Like, why did your mom ask you to leave after you had paused your education to help her and take care of your whole family? Why would your mom ask you to leave?
I have no idea. And to this day, she can't even answer me.
So in that moment when your mom asked you to leave, like, what was going through your head? What were you thinking? What was that like?
I was shocked because here I spent 2 of my young years helping her out where I could have been enjoying my young life. But, you know, I feel like as the oldest we have obligations, and I felt being there for her was my duty. And for her to tell me to leave, that really hurt me. And I'm still hurt at this day. I'm not bitter about it, but it hurts me because she was very ungrateful.
So, I mean, so you're kicked to the curb. So what did you do? I mean, did you end up on the streets or what happened?
I actually called my social worker. I met her at 2 years old, and I called her, and she came and got me, and I lived with her.
Okay, so you called your social worker from elementary school. What would have happened if that didn't work out? Did you have a plan B at all, or?
No, I didn't have a plan B at all.
And so, living at that social worker's house, was that a cakewalk? Was that all easy?
No, her son had the hots for me. And you know how it is, ladies. When you reject a guy, it can make your life a living hell. And that's what he did.
Wow. So, I mean, also, because he actually didn't live there, but he would come visit, so...
Yes, he used to drive from Hamden, Connecticut to South Windsor every week. I would come home from work, he'll be right here at the door. That freaked me out. What really freaked me out, he slept over. Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that...
And he used to come to my job, too, unannounced. Creepy crowd.
And wasn't there also like a judgment piece, too? Didn't the social worker kind of misjudge you before you got there?
Yes, she thought I was the cause of my mother telling me to leave because she thought that I was, you know, the party type, you know, all these, you know, things that's not me. So once I lived with her and she saw my routine, she quickly got rid of that thought of me.
Also, I mean, just for reference, how old were you when your mom asked you to leave? And you
I was 22.
And so, okay, how long were you at the social worker's house?
I moved in October and I was out of there by the summer.
And then where'd you go from there?
Moved into my own apartment.
Cool. And so, you're working at Burlington Coat Factory. So was that without a bump in the road at all, working at Burlington Coat Factory, or did you ever fall on hard times while working there?
Yeah, I was actually terminated there because the managers, I'm quite sure you can understand this, but when you're smarter than your bosses, again, they can make your life a little hell. They think you weren't their job, and that's not true. If you do your work, you don't have to feel that way. So one of the managers lied on me, and it was caught on tape. And I took them to court, and they didn't come up. They didn't come to court because they knew they were in the wrong. So I got paid. But it just shows you how the work environment is, how these bosses can be when you're smarter than them and you're doing their work.
So, okay, so, I mean, what happened after that? So your boss was kind of a little bit insecure there, a little bit defensive, you ended up getting fired. I mean, so you could have ended up, living on the streets then.
But I have friends that I've known so many years. They help me out because I help them out. But if your friends see you need help, they'll help you as long as you help yourself.
And so, how long were you able to stay in that apartment with people kind of helping you out?
I would say a good amount of time.
And so, I remember that you said you were looking for work during that time. What was that like, trying to find a job?
It was hard. I used to go to the Connecticut workplace every day. To this day, they know me. And it was hard. I used to see the for sale signs. I used to go, now you have to do everything online. So it was very hard, but I found my way.
So how long were you looking for work after Burlington Coat Factory?
Like every day.
And I mean, did it take, was it more than a month, more than a couple months? Like how long?
I would have to say it was a year before I found my next job.
Wow.
Luckily, I had the income.
And, okay, so you were able to stay in that apartment, and, yeah, were there any other bumps on the road that you encountered in between, I guess, then and now?
As far as personally?
Well, I mean, as far as, financially, as far as, well, were there any other scares you had of becoming homeless again?
No.
Okay, so basically in your story, there was when your mom asked you to leave, and then there was a time where you lost your job from Burlington Coat Factory. Question about you. You have asthma, right?
Yes, I have asthma and allergies.
How bad is your asthma?
If I don't have my meds, I can pass away. So I definitely depend on it.
So how were you able to afford your medication during your times when like funds were tight?
I couldn't afford it. Luckily, I have the same allergist and the same asthma doctor. They actually gave me samples to help me out because they knew my situation. They know I'm not going anywhere as a patient. So they helped me out during that hard time.
Yeah, so basically, I guess if you hadn't gotten that help and if your doctor hadn't been willing to kind of give out the medicine, I mean, that would not have been good. Were there any avenues for you to be able to get that medicine?
So you definitely need insurance or income, but can't afford insurance during that time. So.
And so, I guess, well, what are you currently up to today? As far as, work or, like, well, yeah, well, what are you currently involved with?
I'm involved in a lot of organizations. I'm involved in this one, great one.
Aren't you working with international students?
Yes, I work with international students as well. It's on the International Student Exchange Program.
And how would you say that during your time of being homeless, that your kind of perceptions of homelessness, did they change at all? Do you feel like you left with a better understanding of what it's like to be homeless? Because I know when I was in high school, I thought, the shopping cart and the bottle, that's what I thought. Stupid. But, I mean, going through it, I mean, did your perceptions change at all?
Yes.
Because growing up, I guess, what did you picture a homeless person being growing up?
Just a bunch of guys just hanging on the corner, because, I mean, that's what they did when I was younger. I didn't know what to call it back then, but just guys just hanging on the corner all day, so I knew they were homeless.
And I guess a final question is, if you could give anyone here a piece of advice or anything that you would want them to leave knowing about homelessness or your experience, what would that be?
I would tell you, if you have a dream, just keep going no matter how hard it is, because I'm living proof of it.
All right. So at this point, presentation becomes conversation. We're going to switch out the mics here so people in the audience can ask questions, but by all means, feel free to ask Lakia some questions.
Hey, Lakia, thank you for sharing your strength, inspiration, and hope. Have you ever been into any situations where you speak to people in homeless shelters or maybe hand out food to people who may be in need that are on the streets? I'm not sure.
Yes, in college, I was vice president of the Capital Living Club. We used to help out the shelters. We used to purchase socks for them and also have the college contribute as well.
Have Joe or Lakia ever been in a situation where they may have had to stay out on the street or been in a shelter of any sort? I'm just wondering.
No, just my friends I stayed with.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess maybe to speak to outdoor living, we do have a gentleman in our bureau who, I mean, he slept in a Buick Marquis on Park Street in Hartford. He slept in a tent. He slept on newspapers. He slept on cardboard boxes. He slept in parks. He slept on rivers. Not on rivers. He doesn't flow. He's by rivers. And so for him, I think what he would say is that part of the problem about living outside is that you're not safe. Another thing is that you're a fugitive. As soon as you lay your head down on your pillow, it's illegal. If you are if you're on private property, you're trespassing. If you're in public property, you're there after dark. And so we actually had a member of our bureau who was sleeping outside New Britain underneath an overpass on a concrete slab, and the police ended up coming and telling them that he had to leave. They were nice about it, but the whole event climaxed where he said, "Where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to go?" And they said, "Well, we don't know, but not here." He said, "Well, where do you want me to go?" "We don't know, but not here." "Do you just want me to disappear?" "Well, no, but we just don't know where you need to go." But that's what it feels like. You feel like you're a fugitive. You have nowhere to go. And he was sleeping there to try to be out of the way. And so then he had to go find some place in a park to sleep. But there are people I know. So you know that there was a 0-degree day a couple weeks ago. I got to work in the morning.
So there was a 0-degree day, and I got to work in the morning, and I walked by a guy. He goes by the name Shorty, and he was wearing kind of his camo jacket, and he had slept the night outside that night when it like went to 0 and then below, and that's just kind of how he lives. And there's a number of reasons why people wouldn't want to live in a shelter. There's a number of reasons. I knew a guy who had PTSD, and it's basically kind of like a human warehouse. To be in a place that has so many people, it's just like he would have a breakdown, so he couldn't do it. I knew, and then him and his pregnant girlfriend, they were living outside for a bit. So anyway, yeah, outdoor living, it's a real thing, and yeah, it's not fun.
Excuse me. When you talk to your mom, like, how is it between you guys knowing that, like, when, like, you succeeded and when she told you to leave, like, when you guys talk now, how do you feel about it?
I actually have a line that I drew with my mother. I mean, I talk with her, I tolerate her, but that's it.
And how about your sisters?
Like, my sisters and brothers, they love me. And, I think because I took good care of them. Like, I don't have any kids, but I took care of them like they were my own. So they have a lot of respect for me. Yeah.
I kind of want to know, like, stir things up about your mother and stuff like that. But you, like, come from a big, proud family?
Well, my mother was a single mom.
So she's there. Can you kind of, like, maybe put yourself in her shoes for a little bit? Like, maybe the reason why she felt so bad was because she was proud that you were actually helping and doing towards work when she actually couldn't and wanted to herself?
It's no excuse to throw someone out that's there for you.
No, I understand, but you gotta kind of think, like, she might have felt hurt a little bit.
Okay, I understand where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. It's still no excuse. Yes? Oh, I went to the state building. They said they couldn't help me.
Why did they tell you why?
I don't know, because I was, I showed them going to school, and they didn't help me. I didn't make a trip there. Yes?
I just want to say I respect the fact that when you're standing up there, you look so happy and you're smiling because, if it was somebody else, like, I feel like they would start tearing up, and it's not a problem to tear up. Like, I respect the fact that you look happy now that you succeeded. You can't, like, you don't need to prove anything to anyone, and that's what you do.
Thank you.
How would you help somebody in your situation?
I will, first of all, I don't know, everybody doesn't believe in God, but I do.
Amen.
And, I would start off with that, but also I would encourage them, because, a lot of people can't do that.
But as far as, like, what would you get them to help them get out of where they're at now? Like, where would you point them in what direction? Like, who could help them?
Yeah, I would actually direct them to the correct sources. Yes, I would. I would definitely help them in other things when they're in a situation. I know how it feels, especially for a woman, and yeah.
Like you just said, being a woman, and even for Joe as well, emotionally, how did you guys handle your situations? It seems like Joe, you were mostly isolated from the people that you loved, and Lakita, to have your mother turn her back on you like that, that has to be emotionally damaging, and that can be just as stressful as living outside or, you know, just being financially unstable. How did either what? Lakeita, since it's your turn, how did you deal with that?
Well, in the Bible it says that. It talks about, you know, parents forsaking their kids, and I looked at her as that.
As for me, it was just the way I was raised. I never ever felt in my life that I couldn't get through anything. And watching my brother pass away from cancer had a big impact on me because we had a long, in-depth conversation the month before he died in hospice, and we talked about life. And he said to me, "It's not what you have, but who you have," and it's stuck with me. And he told me that there's nothing that you can't face in this world. I mean, he taught me how to live. He was 16 years old, and he also taught me how to face death and accept it when you can't change things. So that's how I guess I was able to deal with it, because I didn't feel like there wasn't going to be an outcome, and I wasn't going to stop until there was one. And that's why I need to help the people that can't do these things. I know it's Lakeita's time, sorry, but what we have to realize sometimes is the worst thing I hear, and I've done soup kitchens, I volunteered, I've done all those things that were asked, but when someone says that they've given up, I hate to hear that, because no human being should say they've given up. That means someone gave up on them, or the situation gave up on them. That's when they need us the most. And a lot of these people who are chronically homeless have given up because they see no light at the end of the tunnel. And it's important for us to just keep going on and trying to change things. I know I talk a lot, but I'm impassioned with that.
Yes.
Not really keen for again, it's just for both of your time. I'm sorry for your time being so. That actually brings up a good point when you say giving up. Honestly, kind of the life is so if you ever get to the point, or for other people that you probably met, if you ever think they've ever really gotten to the point, and this is probably the darkest subject to ever talk about, when it comes to suicide.
So the question, just so everyone here heard it, was: is there ever a time where people get so far down in the brinks of despair that they contemplate taking their own life? That was the question.
I never thought about that for me.
Did you ever talk to anybody about that? Like, actually almost got to that point when you actually talked to them?
No.
I've come across people that have. In my own family, I could speak to that because there's mental illness in my family, so it does go around, but I know people that have tried it because they feel that hopelessness, but my goal is that they don't get that hopeless. But there are people out there, especially if you're dealing with mental illness and addiction, that compounds the problem about having suicidal thoughts. Who's first?
Did you have a breaking point, and if you did, how did you compensate for that?
No, I didn't break at all.
Feel better about yourself.
I didn't break myself. I didn't break that.
And I guess maybe to speak to he asked if Lakeita reached a breaking point. Lakeita did not. We do have a member in our bureau who one of the things that she says in her presentations is everyone has a breaking point. And she had been homeless for about a year, had been in 4 shelters, had slept in 4 different houses, and there just got a point to, maybe talking to your question, she felt like she was taking 2 steps forward and 9 steps back. And she said the hardest part for her was that she was really trying. That was almost the hardest part, that she was really trying. And so I call it Charlie Brown syndrome. There's only so many times you can go and try to hit the football and land on your back for you to psych yourself up and talk yourself up, where you're like, okay, well today's going to be the day, but the last 400 days haven't been the day, but today's going to be the day. So that is a thing. And a breaking point can be reached. But as Joe said, people having those positive, healthy relationships with someone speaking hope into their life, they can be very powerful. Well, I think we had another question.
You guys all kind of spoke about how you help people who are homeless in the community. In the community. What would you say for the average person is the most productive way to go about helping them? I know there's soup kitchens, homeless shelters, places you can volunteer, giving food to someone you see on the street.
I actually help out with my church. We food pantry. I help out. Also at the holidays, my church does work, and I help out. And we also have a deal with Food Share, where we distribute food every week.
I was just going to say what you were saying is
every little bit helps. I mean, like I said, you don't know if you appear someday at a soup kitchen, you just validate someone someday and say hi, that may change the direction of their life forever. You have to think about it that way. So any little thing that you can do is fine. But if you see something that's wrong, like a few months ago, we spoke to social workers at the UConn School of Social Work, and we're saying, you guys are the front line. If you see abuses in the system, because the system is broken, it needs to be revamped. I mean, I've given up on the system. But if you see it, you have to speak up. We as a nation have spent close to $7 trillion on the war on poverty, and we're higher poverty rate than we were when we started. So where has that money gone? There's no accountability for it. So it's the little things that we can do. We can empower ourselves to do little things for people that it may not seem that much to you, but just a hello to someone may give them the impression I matter. You know, I can go on for another day.
And also, really quick, if you see, if like the average person sees someone on the side of the road, they see someone suffering like that, what would you recommend doing in that situation? I know you can give them food and things like that, but also you have to be careful because, like, if you give them money, what are they going to do with it? Because I know you see a lot of people have mental illnesses, they have drug addictions, etc.
I travel a lot, so I actually come in contact with people that are homeless, and I give them resources. I usually carry it on me and, help them out, direct them on the right path.
But also, if we see something like that, you're saying you don't have to give money. I know people are apprehensive about it. It's not always about money. If someone's really hungry, they'll take food from you. But there are people that have addictions, and that's part of their life, and they shouldn't be looked down upon because they were shunned to the side because no one decided to help them. You're doing that little thing is going to be the help, but just like Lakia does, I would tell them, we need to contact these people. Fortunately, I know who needs to be contacted, so I'll make a mental note and contact someone and call and give that number out also.
Thank you.
And we have time for one last question, then we're going to have a final wrap-up that's actually going to explain the what next portion in a real quick way. But we have one last question.
And you have a young lady here and a young lady here.
What? Oh, so yeah. Okay.
My question, it's about the story you told of the police officers that just said we don't know where you can go. How is it that in a city like New Britain that has a significant homeless issue, why don't the police officers know where they can go? Why don't they have resources available to say, hey, here's the nearest shelter, this is how you can get there from here? How is that not happening with the folks that are most trusted to keep the public safe, to keep these people safe, to keep the general public safe?
But see, here's the disconnect. I know what you're saying. I don't know how many people are aware of it, but Connecticut was the second state in the nation to pass a homeless Bill of Rights. What a shame that we had to pass the homeless Bill of Rights so that homeless people aren't discriminated against. Basically what it says, it reiterates what it says. You have a right to be in a public place. You have a right not to be harassed just because you're homeless. But we had to pass a bill to say that. A lot of police departments, they mean well, but they don't know. And that's the disconnect. We have to make them aware, okay, right now in the state, we have something going on called Coordinated Care Access, where you call 211 and they're going to stay on the phone with you and get you an appointment and make sure you get placed. It's still in the infancy stages. It's not working well. People are getting appointments 5 weeks out. When you're homeless, you can't wait 5 weeks. But there's a disconnect, okay? So when they say you can't be there, they don't know. They could bring you to the hospital, but the hospital's going to put you back out. They could bring you to a shelter, but if the shelter's full and you're not supposed to be there, there's a lot of issues. And just quickly, I know we don't have time, but the shelter is not the answer. That's what's happened. Shelter has become housing. That's not what it's for. We need to have the affordable housing. We need to get people rehabilitated. Like I said, there's a disconnect in the whole system. It all needs to be revamped, and no one wants to do it. But little by little, we have to attack it, and that's what we're doing. So police officers need some sensitivity training, and it's not their fault for not knowing what to do because they have no direction given to them. That's why the governor's initiative with the second chance, and he also wants to end veterans' homelessness in the state. That's all important to be on the table so that someone knows, what can we do with these people? Because if they don't know, and you would think they would know, who's going to know, you know? Exactly.
So if we give one last round of applause for Lakia and Joe.
in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to wrap up, which is just, there are 3 final things I want you to know as you're leaving, because the goal, we hope that you went on a journey and different people have different levels of experience, of knowledge about homelessness, but we're hoping that you're leaving this saying, well, what next? Like the gentleman in the orange, that question, well, what can we do? That's an excellent question. There are 3 final things I want you to know, which is homelessness today isn't what homelessness was 40 years ago, that it increased 3 to 4 times in the 80s in most U.S. cities, which means that something happened. Homelessness is created by people's decisions, people's lack of decisions, people's actions, people's lack of actions, which makes me think, that right there is Hurricane Katrina, that homelessness is a man-made disaster. When Hurricane Katrina came, people had 2 options. They could board up their places, or they could get out. They could get in their car, on their horse, whatever, and get out of there. But we have a 3rd option, which is, we can stop this hurricane. If homelessness is a man-made disaster, we can do things to take it from being a Category 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, tropical storm, rainy day, misty day, and then it can be just gone altogether. But here's the question of what next. And there you are. Yeah, I drew that, not really. But there are 3 things. You can educate, you can donate time and resources, and you can advocate. So for educate, well, you are now the face for the faces of homelessness. Your stories have intersected with the story of Joe and Lakia. Be a sharer of that story. Tell people what you learned. Go do some research. The internet machine is your friend. You can look things up. There are documentaries, and just help people understand what homelessness is like. There are people who are like ignorant 18-year-old me who think homelessness is just people pushing shopping carts and they're the reason for their situation. And just for you to be an educator that helps people to want to get involved. Donate time. When you see a person who is homeless, always give, but it doesn't always have to be money. If you don't have $5, you can give them 5 minutes. And sometimes just for people to not have to get to a point where they think they're invisible, that is such a gift. For you to be validated as a human being. There are ways to volunteer with Hands on Hartford. There are a lot of places to help out with shelters, with outreach. Resources of people need tents, people need socks, food for food pantries. I know at Hands on Hartford, we have a sign up in our food pantry which says, sorry, but due to a lack of food, we have to have smaller portions. So people, these resources are really needed. And advocate is a 3rd piece. And that's where, to donate resources, you're putting food in a food pantry. Advocate, that's when you ask the question, well, why does a food pantry have to exist in our country? And what can we do so a food pantry doesn't have to exist? And the Homeless Bill of Rights is a beautiful example of how they went to the LOB in Hartford and got laws passed so that people who are homeless can have rights. And the final thing I'm going to say is picture a snowflake. Not very scary, not very intimidating, unless it is, then maybe work that out with a friend. But I sang about snow when I was in elementary school. Now picture an avalanche. Terrifying. If you were in a log cabin and an avalanche was coming at you, I would suggest getting out of said log cabin pretty quickly, because there's about to be a world of hurt on your little log cabin. And so the only difference between a snowflake and an avalanche is that an avalanche is a bunch of snowflakes moving in the same direction with a whole lot of velocity and momentum. And so we believe that all of you have giftings, all of you have circles of influence, all of you could be the first domino in an infinitely long chain. As Joe said, you cannot measure the ripple effect of a person who is living to help serve other people. And we honestly believe that people moving together, that you can be the avalanche that helps in the hurricane of homelessness. And we wish you the best of luck in putting us out of business. We have one last round of applause for